Hi, I'm Simon Rose, co-founder of Reference Point Therapy. Today, I'd like to share with you what I feel is the most important technique in all of Reference Point Therapy, which is our Level 2 technique, the art of reconception. As far as I know, this is a completely unique technique. There is nothing like it in the whole world. Instead of dealing with your issues one by one, the art of reconception works sort of back to front, the other way around. What you get to do is you sit with a client and you take them back to the point where their problem started, and you nip it in the bud, so to speak. You clear problems before they start without really needing to know in any detail what the problems are. In other words, a client could come to me as an RPT practitioner and say, I have 10 different problems I want to clear. And I take them through this technique and they would clear those problems without actually having to tell me what those problems are. Let me explain to you what the technique is. It's called Art of Reconception because it is about going back to the time of our conception. And the pun in the name you've heard probably of rebirthing, which is about changing the story of your birth. So reconception means going even further back to the time you were conceived. Everyone's conception has a story. And what I realized was that the story about a person's conception tells an incredible amount about the person's personality, even if they're not aware of it, even if they were adopted and they never met their birth parents and they don't know that story. It's somehow carried within ourselves and forms a big part of who we are. It's not necessary to actually know the details of what happened, because let's be realistic here, we are talking about our parents and sex, and you probably don't want to know the finer details, and it's not actually necessary to talk to your parents about it. What we do is we use a particular meditation that we teach on the first course. It's called Pretending to Be. And we use that exercise to access what our mother and father in turn were feeling and experiencing in their consciousness at the time of our conception. So it's the feelings, it's particularly the heart and the body that matters and that drives what patterns we actually inherited from that. So just to give you an example, it's quite common that when people connect with the energy of their mother at the time of conception, they find that the mother, like many women, experience a sense of duty around sex and having to perform. So what that would mean is that the person's conception, which is the spark of their entry into this world, came under a cloud of duty and obligation on the mother's side. And perhaps on the father's side, there was an energy of disconnectedness from the mother, really just needing his needs to be met. So the question that I ask you to consider is, what kind of personality do you inherit if the mother is experiencing duty and the father's experiencing neediness, and those two come together to form a child? What does that actually mean for the level of consciousness, the level of awareness of our child? The result of that type of consciousness in the mother and father is a person who, at least on a spiritual level, was conceived into an energy of poor personal boundaries and disrespect of other people's boundaries. And what you find is, as they grow up and become an adult, they experience all sorts of health problems, relationship problems, spiritual and emotional problems, because that underlying conflict around boundaries is part of their essential nature. It's part of who they are. It's there from their conception. This is something that can never be cleared through techniques like tapping, projecting energy, changing beliefs, because it's so much deeper than that. All of those energetic and emotional techniques get like this deep, but we're talking about getting to the core of who a person is, their conception. And unless you can go right back to that conception and change the story, the experience of the inner mother and inner father, until you change that, they can never really change who they are as a person. The plus side is now we've got that technique. If you can take a person back to that time, that instant where the mother and the father united as one, or really were meant to unite energetically as one, if you can change that story at that moment, you can change everything about a person's life. My inner guidance is that 90% or perhaps more of what I call the human condition really starts at that moment in time. What do I mean by that? Well, the human condition is what you see when you look around at the state of humanity on this planet, and you see so many people living in misery, in depression, in poverty. You see people so disconnected from each other as beings, disconnected from the planet, disconnected from the environment, disconnected from their spirituality. That is the human condition. And I think the human condition is caused more than anything else by the energy at conception. I talked about the negative side of the human condition, but what really motivated me with this technique was what's possible for you. Where this technique really came from was reading amazing books and stories by ascended masters who described what they felt was the secret to enlightenment. And I noticed this pattern through many books, which traced a connection between a person's level of evolution, their consciousness, and their conception. Some teachers go so far as to say that the real secret to having an amazing child is to put all your consciousness into a loving union at their conception. Through my research, I realized that this is actually an ancient tantric tradition, which talks about the way in which a man and a woman can unite as one. So for example, their heart chakras become one, or their base and sacral chakras become one. There's only energetically one being there, and as two people become one and they conceive a child into that energy, that is the recipe for an incredibly enlightened child. So the ancient tantric masters have known for thousands of years how you can have a very enlightened child. But I feel that we've taken that one step further. We've said, actually, it's never too late for us to go back to the time of our conception and to see what our mother and father were really experiencing and to rewrite that story, to bring that level of consciousness and awareness into ourselves. I'd like to end this video with a little exercise that you can do. What we do is we're going to do a very simple, quick meditation and ask ourselves in our heart of hearts, what is the level of consciousness or just simply the connection that our mother and father was feeling at the time of our conception? And I use a scale of 0 to 10. So on this scale, 0 means that there was no connection between the mother and father. That could be accounted for by abuse, for example. And 10 out of 10, I define that as the connection of two ascended masters performing, for example, Tantra, really uniting all their minds and chakras as one being. So realistically, most of us are probably not 0 and not 10. I've done this exercise with hundreds and hundreds of people in our level 2 course. And what I found is that the average number is about 2 to 2.5, just so you know. So it's a pretty steep scale, in other words. So 0 is quite low and 10 is just phenomenally high. 10, anything above 5 and you're a world leader, and anything above 8 to 10 and you're an amazing mystic. So with that being how steep the scale is, most people do this meditation and they say it's 2, 2.5, and after they've done the technique, they're at 7, they're at 8 or higher. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to sit comfortably, probably close your eyes for a minute and take a couple of deep breaths. What I'd like you to do is to just say this. This is a very simplified version of our meditation on the course. I'd like you to say, I pretend to feel the connection between my mother and father at the time of my conception. And I want you to just imagine this. Just imagine two spheres of light, two beautiful balls of light coming together. One is your mother, one is your father. Don't try to visualize them as people, but just souls or beings that come together. And if you imagine these two circles as separate beings, at the time of conception, they might start to merge and they might start to become one. Right? And my question to you is, to what extent do they become one being? So 0 would be that they don't really touch, and 1 it would be like they just barely touch, all the way through to 10 out of 10, which is that your parents became one being. I'll be quiet just to give you a moment. What's that level of connectedness between the parents? So just asking yourself, what is that connectedness? If I could measure it out of 10, what would it be? So just take a moment, just to acknowledge yourself, whatever the answer was for you, and we let go of our parents by saying, I stop pretending now. And having let go of that, we just put that aside. Don't let it worry you. Whatever you got is whatever you got. It just explains a lot about who you are as a being. Now here's the good news. It's actually quite easy to change. It's not a 5-second thing to do or to explain. It takes about a whole day to teach that whole process of going through. And to do it with a client takes, depending on the person, takes half an hour to an hour to guide someone through the actual process. It's important that you know, don't try to force these two balls together as one. The technique is not about that. It's not about balls of light. That was just a very simplistic idea I gave you for the meditation. What we really do on the Level 2 course is we address the question of where and how are our parents connected, where and how are they disconnected. And we look through all the different minds and consciousnesses that people have. For example, one personality type that you meet is a personality type where the mother and father connected on a sexual level. They had a great sexual connection, but their hearts and their minds were miles apart. You get another type of couple. You might see this where there's a high level of mental compatibility. They've written, they've corresponded, they've got similar thoughts and beliefs, and their brains come together as one, but their hearts are not really connecting, and their sexual minds are miles apart. They've never really connected on that level. So you get a very different type of personality from that child. Or of course you could get people whose hearts come together. They have a true love connection, but their minds are miles apart because their thoughts and their beliefs are different, and perhaps their sexual minds are very, very different. So that brings into the world a type of child who has that heart-centeredness but are very disconnected on other levels. And we take that through other minds that will account for abundance or financial success, through being grounded, through being successful in different areas of our lives. We find that it all comes down to this question of how the mother and the father were united at conception. So I'm giving you an opportunity. I invite you to go deeper than any other healing technique we've come across. I invite you to save yourselves years of work, save yourself changing all those beliefs, doing all the regression, doing all the tapping and the channeling energy and everything else that you might have heard of. I invite you to stop talking about your problems, stop counseling, stop coaching, stop all the different things that involve talking. And instead, why don't you come with Yvette and I and our Level 2 teachers on a journey that takes you back to the very beginning. We know where that spark of consciousness begins. We know what moment in time drives who you are, drives your personality. So come with us on this journey called the Level 2 RPT course, and we'll show you how to profoundly shift your life, to change your consciousness right from that moment when your consciousness began. I hope that explaining this has inspired you as much as talking about it has inspired me to do it all over again. I really would love to share this with you, and I hope that we see you someday on our Level 2 practitioner training course. Thank you.